Light. Well, light, I think, is knowledge. Knowledge is love. Love is freedom. Freedom is energy. Energy is all. Without any doubt, without light, we can't have any images.
A cinematographer is a visual psychiatrist, moving the audience through a movie from here to there to there to here, making them think the way you want to think, painting pictures in the dark.
You have to light, you have to compose, and you have to create movement. And those are the three elements of cinematography.
You have to get style the hard way. You earn it by growing it internally and letting it bubble out from inside.
Some of it comes from experience, some of it comes from inspiration, and some of it just happens.
Film is like a sumo wrestler. It's, you know, sometimes you get thrown out of the ring by it, and sometimes you win.
I think it's really important to really delve deep into it and really become part of your subconscious and your psyche to really develop an idea for how you visually want to represent a story.
We have the ability to work in all genres, and each film should have its own style.
I think it was the fascination initially with the technology, and then how mastering that technology in the service of art made cinematography such a unique thing that just kept me in it to this day.
My name is Ramieri Farrison.
Russ Alsobrook.
Howard Anderson.
I'm Howard Anderson III.
Peter Anderson.
My name is Michael Ballhaus.
Dion Beebe.
I'm Bill Bennett.
Gabriel Beristain, and I'm a cinematographer. I'm Mexican, British educated, and American improved.
Larry Bridges.
Jonathan Brown.
I'm Steve Buren. I'm a cinematographer.
Bill Butler.
Bobby Byrne.
Russell Carpenter.
James Chrysanthus.
Peter Collister.
Jack Cooperman.
Erickson Core.
I'm Richard Crudo.
I'm Dean Cundy.
Oliver Curtis.
I'm Alan Davio, and I'm a cinematographer.
Roger Deakins.
Peter Deming.
Caleb Deschanel.
I'm Ron Dexter.
Bill Dill.
George Spiro-Deeby.
Ernest Dickerson.
I'm Richard Edlund.
John Fowler.
I'm Don Fauntleroy.
Steve Fierberg.
William A. Fraker.
My name is Michael Goy.
Stephen Goldblatt.
My name is Jack Green.
Adam Greenberg.
Robbie Greenberg, cinematographer.
My name is Henner Hoffman.
Ernie Holzman.
My name is Gil Hubbs.
I'm Judy Irola.
Mark Irwin.
Levi Isaacs.
Johnny Jensen.
I'm Victor J. Kemper.
Francis Kenny.
Richard Klein.
Fred Konekamp.
My name is Laszlo Kovacs. Laszlo Kovac.
I'm Ellen Kuras, ASC.
I'm Jacek Laskus.
I am Andrew Laszlo.
I am Denis Lenoir.
Matt Leonetti.
Peter Levy.
Matthew Libatique.
I'm Stephen Lighthill.
Carl Walter Lindenlaub.
Bruce Logan.
Julio Macat.
Isidore Mankowski, ASC.
Chris Manley.
Stephen Mason.
I'm Clark Mathis.
Don McQuaig.
Rob McLaughlin.
Chuck Minsky.
Donald M. Morgan.
Kramer Morgenthau.
David Mullen.
Fred Murphy.
My name is Hiro Narita.
I'm Michael Negrin.
My name is Saul Negrin.
Darren Okada.
Woody Omens.
I'm Daniel Perot.
Fern Pearlstein.
Wally Pfister.
Bill Pope.
Stephen Poster.
Bob Primes.
Tony Richmond. I'm a cinematographer.
My name is Owen Roisman.
Pete Romano.
I'm Paul Ryan.
I'm Nancy Schreiber.
My name's John Schwartzman.
My name's John Seal.
Dean Simler.
I'm Michael Sarrazin from New Zealand.
Stephen Shaw.
I'm Newton Thomas Siegel, and on my best days, I'm a cinematographer.
Bradley Six.
Dante Spinotti.
I'm Uli Steiger.
My name's Tom Stern.
My name is Vittorio Storaro. I'm a cinematographer. I'm not a director of photography.
Rodney Taylor.
I'm John Toll. I'm a cinematographer.
Case Van Oostrum.
I'm Amy Vincent.
My name is Haskell Wexler.
Gordon Willis.
Ralph Woolsey.
Robert Yeoman.
I'm Guillermo Zsigmond. I'm a cinematographer.
Invariably, two questions come up. And the first question, somebody will ask, how did you, meaning me, start in the film business?
When I was a kid, I was mad about movies, but
It was a long time. I suppose my career, my life just gradually grew into my dreams, really, you know?
I became a cinematographer because at 14, after being interested in photography for about 4 years, I met a cinematographer, and the day I met him, I decided that's what I wanted to do for the rest of my life.
I got interested when I first saw a demonstration of color television, and I had gone to movies and had black and white television, but when I saw color, I said, I have to find out how they do this.
Even though in those days you really had no hope of ever becoming anyone in the movie business unless you were somehow connected to somebody in the business.
Well, my father was a cinematographer.
I was born into it.
My dad was an animation cameraman.
I was in a family business. My father, my uncle, and my grandfather, and all of the relatives that I can remember on my father's side were barbers.
My father was a makeup artist at Warner Brothers in Brooklyn during the Depression. So I was always around, hanging around. And I decided I wanted to be an actor early on when I was a kid. Lucky for me, I changed my mind.
I became a cinematographer because of the influence of my grandmother. And she was a school teacher in Mazatlan, Mexico.
When I was in Mexico, being from a family of actors and filmmakers.
My aunt, who along with my mother, were both extras. And my aunt said, Billy, you're going to go to school and you're going to become a cinematographer. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, they're the most respected people on the set. They're all wear ties. And it's a great profession.
My dad always contended it was a great business to fall back on if you had another opportunity. Little did I know I spent 7 years cutting hair waiting for an opportunity.
My father was head of the portrait gallery at Warner's.
My mother had been an art dealer.
My father was a painter and sculptor, so if I went to become a lawyer or a doctor, I think I would have been disowned.
I could never draw or paint or do anything like that. I picked this camera up and I could paint.
Now, this is back in Minnesota.
I was born and raised in Chicago.
I was born in Hungary.
Sydney, Australia.
Born and raised in Los Angeles.
I grew up in Mexico.
I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio.
I'm originally from Poland.
This was Eau Claire, Wisconsin.
You know, I come from an area of Italy which is very far away from any movie industry.
We go back actually to Jerusalem. When I started, I built a tent and I started pick up cartoons, splice them together.
I love film because it's all I've ever done, really.
It's all I've ever done. From when I left school at 15, I joined Pathé News.
I started in television when I was 16 as a props boy.
I was a messenger boy running up and down Water Street with cans of film.
I was lucky that my father has a beautiful dream. He was a projectionist in a very big company in Italy in the 50s, Lux Film. And he was dreaming probably to be part of the image that he was screening. So he put his dream on me.
When I was a kid, I liked still photography, loved it. I thought for a while I wanted to be a photographer for Life magazine, like Gene Smith, who was one of my childhood heroes. And the year I was a senior in high school, Life folded.
And I ended up starting to go to university because of not knowing any better and not daring to apply to film school.
And then when I went to college, I kind of was trying to decide, should I go into filmmaking, which seemed like jumping off a cliff if you were in Detroit.
In college, I was a lighting designer.
I was the AV guy. I was the town projectionist. I was also the school projectionist every school that I went to.
I was in school studying mathematics and physics.
I studied engineering in college.
I'm educated as a mechanical engineer in Copenhagen, Denmark.
I was studying English literature at Hofstra University, and I needed 6 credits to graduate, and I took a film course.
Well, my first love really was journalism.
I began studying architecture in addition to film studies.
I was an architecture student, and I was faced with a difficult model which I couldn't build, so I decided to make an animated film.
But I remember when I was cutting it together between 2 very old VCRs, and 30 minutes had passed, and I was getting hungry, and I looked up, and actually 6 hours had passed. And I realized, I never really lost track of time doing calculus.
I went to Johns Hopkins as an undergraduate to become a physician.
First, I was a movie buff, like watching 500 films a year at the Cinematheque. And the films, I mean, projected, not tapes at the time. And, of course, my studies, I was studying medicine at the time, medical studies. But of course, I was such a failure. So I had to do something else.
And one day went to see a movie, Akira Kurosawa's Ron, and I was pretty blown away. I thought, if that's something you can do, I want to do it. It seemed like film was closer to dreams than the rest of the artwork I was doing.
The next big influence would probably be Days of Heaven. This happened when I was in college.
At the end of high school, I was in a library, and I was walking through the stacks, and a book of a red cover caught my eye, and it was called The Work of the Motion Picture Cameraman by Freddie Young, BSc. And I said, oh, what's a motion picture cameraman?
In film school, I met a young gentleman by the name of Spike Lee, and I shot all of his student projects in the second and third years.
I didn't go to film school. I worked on a lot of student films.
I came out of film school and then didn't work for a lot of years.
I was painting the first year out of art school.
I wanted to be a painter at one time. As much as I loved painting, I couldn't get them to move. They were like, and I kept trying to get them to move, and the only way I could do that was to start shooting little films.
I had a dream. I dreamt of Gandhi and a spinning wheel, and the Life magazine pictures that Margaret Bourke-White had shot. And in the dream, they animated. Not only did the spinning wheel move, but the camera moves around it. And I took that as a sign that maybe it was time I add the dimension of motion to my still photography.
As a designer, or as an illustrator, I would be dealing with single image, and it became increasingly frustrating just to be looking at a single image for a long time, and began to think of sequence of images to tell stories.
I was a secretary in the at KQED, and I watched the people who come out of the film department every day carrying silver cases and wearing Levi's, and I didn't want to wear nylons anymore, and I started working with the film department on the weekends.
Started actually as a stagehand.
I started off as a documentary still photographer.
I started as an underwater cameraman in the U.S. Navy.
And I was working as a waiter.
I started off as an animator.
When I graduated college, I arrived here in Los Angeles and sought work, and initially couldn't get the time of day from anyone.
When I moved to New York and answered an ad in the Village Voice, which got me onto a real movie.
I had a friend that was working on a low-budget horror film in South Carolina, and I went down there and worked as a PA.
Started right from the bottom. I was a PA, I was an assistant to the lowest assistant.
I did everything from sweeping the floor to projecting the film.
When I started in the business, the only equipment I was trusted with was a broom.
When I was 26 years old, I finished film school in Hungary. I went to film school in Hungary. And the revolution came in 1956. Against the Russians, with my friend Wilmer Zsigmond, we covered. All the cinematographers during the revolution, we were shooting footage, documentary footage. We shot about 30,000 feet of film. And we had a meeting, secret meeting, that some people will have to volunteer to go to the West and take the footage out. We smuggled it out. And we couldn't go back. And I volunteered, actually, because I had a reason to go. As long as we figured we are here in the West, this was still in Germany, Austria, Vienna, might as well let's go to Hollywood. Of course, that was easy to say, but in reality, actually, if you don't know the language, you don't know anybody, and you go and visit all the Hungarians who were in the business in those days, like Joe Pasternak, Zsa Gabor, and you can name all of them. And then we thought that maybe they can help us to get into the film business, but it didn't work that way, actually, They said that first you have to show what you can do, and then we can help you. And I didn't realize if once we showed what we can do, we didn't need their help anymore.
I couldn't get past secretaries. At one point, I sent out resumes hand-printed on sandpaper, just so they would remember it, I sent the resumes written on shirt cardboard, so they couldn't crumple it up and toss it in the wastebasket.
My family wanted to know, well, what are you going to do with your life now? And they had some
some business ideas, some things that I should do to make something of myself.
My father always would say to me when I was first starting out, well, why don't you join CBS, or why don't you get a real job as, you know, a cameraman on a news station?
Became a news cameraman with a 16mm Bell & Howell, black and white. We used to take great pride in shooting 3 news stories and 100 feet of film. Rupert Murdoch's channel, we'd save money.
And I managed to get into the government station, which is the Australian Broadcasting Commission. And there was quite a good little group of features-type cameramen there from the early days. A lot of them were ex-World War II combat cameramen. So you had this amazing crossover between fairly sophisticated features cameramen and rough-and-tumble alcoholic combat cameramen. And so it was a good learning process. You didn't know who you'd be going out with to assist them, but you'd either end up, you know, doing a lovely job of something or totally drunk.
I had a couple of guys live next door to me, and they asked me if I wanted a job, and I got a job at a television station.
You know, pushing dollies and the boom and all of that stuff.
And it seemed like the coolest guys on the set were around the camera.
I started in 1943. And I worked 8 years as an assistant cameraman.
I showed up first day of work with a paper bag and a tape measure.
I was never an assistant. I was never an operator, actually, even.
Yeah, loaded mags and slapped slates for a long time.
Cleaned tripods and cleaned up the equipment, the cases, and drove the gear from place to place.
Anything good that ever happened to me happened because of someone else giving me an opportunity.
The thing about the business is the generosity of people. So I had a wonderful learning experiences and working relationships with Owen Roisman taught me to see in a tenth of a stop.
You know, I always say when I'm teaching students anything is cinematography is an art form, but at the same time it's a craft. And it's definitely a combination of the two.
One of my mentors at Dartmouth was Andy Laszlo. He was invited to talk about half an hour to our class on cinematography, and 2 days later he was still talking. So Andy was a great mentor and a great inspiration, and probably one of the reasons why I really wanted to get into the business.
You have to be totally, absolutely committed to it. You have to, it has to become religion. You have to eat it, sleep it, talk it, and go after every opportunity there is to get yourself established.
And in the process, I ran into this wonderful man who eventually became my mentor, Ron Dexter.
And I would say Ron Dexter was an inspiration to so many of us.
I taught all along. Once I knew something, I'd share whatever I knew.
He would have occasional symposiums where he would talk about what he was doing and show the experiments that he was making, and then he'd have us all bring in pieces of film, what we were shooting, and have group discussions.
I was lucky that the gaffer really took an interest in my learning electricity and light.
My mentor in Hollywood is the cinematographer Vilmos Zsigmond.
I had the opportunity to work with Vittorio here in Los Angeles, and I would pick up Mr. Storaro at the hotel in Sunset every morning, and I'd drive him to work. And I would ask him a question about maybe composition or a certain scene we were doing today, and then I would get a 30 or 40-minute lecture. I felt like a doctorate on composition or color or Yugoslavian primitive art or whatever it was that was his inspiration for that film.
So when I was young and I was mentoring, it was a really unique opportunity to get to spend time with these people and really sort of understand their thought process. I mean, I can remember with Vittorio bringing my light meter and a sketchbook around, and he used to just berate me. And he'd say, that's not what it's about. It's, you know, it's from the heart. It's about the emotion. And I thought to myself, yeah, that's all good and well. You're Vittorio Storaro.
I always was Vittorio Storaro, even at my beginning. When I started, nobody knew me. Nobody, saw myself compared to what I did before. I think that you should be always yourself. From when you start, from when you are in the journey, or when you think you reach one specific place. That's part of your personality, part of your way of thinking, part of your way of doing. Many times, yes, young cinematographers are telling me, you can do that, or maybe refuse the project, or maybe do one selection in your life because you are now this kind of person. I always did that. I mean, I remember that on the first film, Giovinezza, Giovinezza, and I was doing tests for actors. And we were like more or less your crew, a small crew. We were working in a very simple way and just trying to understand what the movie is supposed to look like. And somehow I found myself uncomfortable for what the director asked me to do. And I was forced to do it. And at the end of the day, I was 28. I say to him, goodbye, I don't think I come back tomorrow because I don't think you need me. You need someone that just put one light, just let you see whoever's in front of you, not in a particular way that you want to see this person. So I don't think I come back tomorrow. I was married 2 years before. We already have one daughter. My wife was expecting a child, and we had only $50 in bank. And I say no.
No is a very important word. Very important. Yes is not a good word all the time. You know, I mean, it doesn't get you more work. In fact, no gets you more work than yes, because anything works while you're shooting it. Nothing works in the screening room if it's no good. So what they said the day before, they can't remember when they get in the screening room. So if you said no to something bad and it turns out to be right in the screening room, they forget about the no the day before. But they never forget about the yes if it's no good.
And that was wonderful. And I was Vittorio Storaro then on my first film.
I believe a cinematographer should always be interpreting, should never be recording, but adding their point of view, their interpretation to anything. And in order to interpret, you have to make a commentary, you have to say something about it, either with light and dark or color, or composition or textures or whatever.
You shoot it in a gritty, grainy handheld